I saw a study done by two professors, one at MIT, one at Northwestern. And what they did is they actually thought that, you know what, I bet your ratings and reviews give me just about as much information as a traditional focus group. So they looked at a number of categories. And what they came back with was, on average, 96% of what was discovered in a focus group, they could have got by just analyzing the ratings and reviews on Amazon.com.
Yeah.
Welcome to E-Commerce Deep Dive, the show where we explore e-commerce business strategy and the future of shopping online. Your host is John Giorso, founder and CEO of Orca Pacific, a full-service agency dedicated to growing brands on Amazon. Every week, John talks shop with the biggest players in retail and e-commerce. Today's episode is all about reviews. John is joined by Peter V.S. Bond, Vice President of Retail Strategy at Power Reviews. The two answer questions like, what are some creative ways to generate organic reviews? And how do you deal with bad reviews? They lay out some important strategies for brands, so we hope you get a lot from it. Thanks, and enjoy the show.
Peter, welcome to the show.
John, such a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to join you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it'd be great to start out with just a little bit of background on you and then what you're up to today.
Sure. Well, my background has been a bit of a transition. I started in the market research space. I spent 9 years at IRI working with both retail and packaged goods clients. So Kroger, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Campbell Soup. I moved over to the loyalty space. I spent 4 years at dunnhumby working on the Kroger business, helping make sense of all of the content and all of the data that was being generated by their Kroger Plus loyalty card. I then spent 3 years at CVS Health, where I ran category and brand personalization. So if anyone's ever been to CVS and gotten a 6-foot-long register receipt with coupons on it, that's me. I'm the guy that Jimmy Kimmel made fun of on late night TV all the time.
Nice.
I apologize, but it generated a tremendous amount of measurable revenue.
Yep.
And then more recently, I've joined 2 years ago Power Reviews, which is a voice of the customer SaaS platform. We're about helping brands collect authentic customer feedback in the form of ratings, reviews, answers to questions, videos, and images, which generates trust and authenticity among consumers.
Awesome. So, I guess kind of maybe starting at a macro view, how do you view reviews today in kind of the e-commerce landscape overall, and what's changed since you've been doing this over the last 2 years?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between the digital shelf and the physical shelf. In a physical world, the rules are dictated by things like, where's my shelf placement? Is my brand blocked together? Am I in the circular? Do I have a display? Digital shelf is radically different. The digital shelf is not where brands live. It's where individual products live, and every product has to fend for itself. It has to fend for itself in where it ends up in the search results. So the search results can be driven obviously by the keywords, but increasingly they are an algorithm that's based upon the sales rate of the product, the average rating that product receives, and the number of reviews that they've collected. And that has truly been Amazon's secret sauce, right? That is why people go to Amazon. I've got a really interesting story I'll just share with you very quickly.
Sure.
Last year, my wife and I were lucky enough to have a daughter. And during my wife's first trimester, she was nauseous like many other people. And she handed me a piece of paper that had a list of quite a number of authorized OTC nausea medications. So off she sent me to the grocery store with this list from her OB. And as I'm sitting there in the store, there are 4 of the items on the shelf, and I want to make sure I get the right one because I don't want my wife to suffer. I look on the retailer's app, and of course there's no content because they don't have ratings and reviews at this particular grocery retailer. So I did what 70% of all Americans do when they need information about products and they're in physical stores. I opened up my Amazon app.
Sure.
And sure enough, All 4 of those products were on the app and they all had ratings, but there was a 5th product that wasn't on the shelf, but it was on the list and it had the best reviews of all. So as I was sitting there in the physical store, I placed an order and it was delivered via Prime Now later that day.
Yep.
So the message there I say to brands and to retailers are, it's an omnichannel world we live in now. And if you're not ready to deliver content to your clients wherever they want to get it, there's this company in Seattle that's more than happy to do that, and they're going to steal your business from you. So what's really changed is, it's a long story of saying, what's really changed is people have devices that get them content on demand, and consumers more than ever expect that content to exist. And if they don't get it from you, they're going to get it from someone else. They're not going to just abandon their effort to get that feedback. Now, they look for content on a product page or a listing page in many different ways. They want to see what the product looks like. If they've never held the product, that image carousel at the top of the page is by far, our research says, the most important part of a product page, in the absence of being able to physically hold the product. But a close second is ratings and reviews, because consumers are looking for feedback that's authentic, feedback from people who've actually tried a product or purchased a product. And so being able to share that content with them, and then to be able to badge it accordingly to say, this is from a verified buyer, or maybe this came from a sampling program. All of that helps consumers sift through and make decisions and evaluate the content. But it's amazing that thousands of people you've never met, you're willing to trust as a shopper them more than you are what a retailer or a brand says about their product on the site.
Hey everyone, John here. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I wanted to give you a quick message and let you know that this episode is sponsored by Orca Pacific. Orca Pacific is a full-service agency with an exclusive focus on Amazon. We have capabilities in really everything a brand would need to succeed on the platform. Everything from advertising to content development and SEO, merchandising, marketing, you name it, as it relates to driving and converting demand on the platform. We have a robust suite of services on the back end related to operations, forecasting, FBA, demand planning, etc. And we do a lot on the higher level strategic elements of the platform. So think long-term planning, key negotiations, access to new and beta programs, anything and everything that has to do with accelerating a brand on the Amazon platform. If you want to hear more about what we do, please visit our website at www.orcapac.com. A salesperson will get in touch with you and we can talk more about how we can accelerate your brand on the platform. With that being said, we'll get back to the show. Have you seen this change over the last couple of years? I know we were talking about review syndication, and maybe that's going away with some of the other, Amazon's never done it, but some of the other e-commerce platforms. Are you seeing a change in the way that the retailers approach reviews?
Yeah, I actually am. I see a lot of retailers that want to have uniqueness in their customer experience. And if they have the dedication to do so, they will deliver against that by making decisions that are right for their customers. So as an example, retailers like Costco and Best Buy have stopped sourcing ratings and reviews from brands. So just for the audience to know, for most retailers other than Amazon in the past, the bulk of the content for ratings and reviews were actually generated by brands, and then they were shared to those retailer sites, badged accordingly. But they were shared to those retailer sites by third-party platform companies like Power Reviews, who help brands collect that content.
So it was still customer reviews, but it was being kind of correlated, organized by the brand, and then pushed to the retailer, basically.
Exactly. And for retailers that are doing a substantial amount of omnichannel commerce, and I use that term specifically because for omnichannel retailers, for some of them, their e-commerce contribution to total sales volume has been relatively low pre-pandemic.
Sure.
But for those that had frequent shopper loyalty programs, their transactional history associated with individual households was quite rich. Club stores have 100%. You can't shop at a club store unless you have a club card, and that means that the transaction and every single item that you purchase can be traced back to you. For grocery retailers like Kroger, that's as high as 96%. Even for drug chains like CVS and Walgreens, it's higher than 70%. So that means you have an enormous wealth of information of people who've actually purchased a product. And sometimes just asking them to write a review, much like Amazon does on a fairly religious basis, is a very quick way to generate content. So for retailers like Costco, that has 100% household identification, or BJ's Wholesale Club, the ability to generate that content from verified buyers and badge it accordingly so that customers who are reading the reviews actually know it was written by someone who did buy this product, that has a lot of power in its influence in helping to accelerate the path to purchase. But other retailers do different things that are a hybrid. A good example is a client of ours, Ulta. So Ulta does accept syndicated content, but it is voracious about generating its own content. So we worked with them to help build a modification to their display code, which says that once a product has more than 500 reviews, the default shifts from show me all reviews to show me reviews that were generated on ulta.com.
Interesting.
If you want to change that, you can, but as a user, they believe, and from their own attitudinal research, that their consumers are much more willing to trust content that was generated on Ulta rather than content that was syndicated.
So basically, then they're using syndication as kind of a stepping stone to just get to, whatever they think is kind of a minimum quantity of reviews that's relevant.
Yeah, I think if you ask Best Buy, they'd probably tell you that's exactly what they did. They recently, just in the last 6 months, stopped doing it. And what it means is that the content you see on their site is going to be holistically different than what you see on other retailers that do accept content sharing from brands. Now, big retailers like Walmart and Target do a decent job of generating their own content, and certainly Ulta is a great example where they're doing it very proactively. But ultimately, that just means that they become a qualified source for content, and consumers who understand that, they'll start turning to some of those other sites the way that, in the example I gave to you earlier, I did when I was in the grocery store.
Sure. So then basically what I hear you saying is that the move away from syndication is not these retailers saying we don't believe in syndication, we made a mistake, we never should have done that. It's just the sort of natural progression of saying, yeah, that was effective for the time being. Now we're sort of moving on as we get more volume going through e-commerce, more organic reviews. We're going to start to rely more and more on that because it's just a better customer experience.
Yeah, and it's not just in the background of the content, it's also in the technology. So if you went back 5 or 6 years and looked at most of these retailers, the way content appears is JavaScript code on product display pages and product listing pages that would query against, say, it was our code, it would query against our data store. And increasingly, retailers want to own that experience. That's probably one of the biggest changes that's taken place in the last 2 years. The issue with that specifically is when one provider in this space tries to create a monopoly by owning the display code and owning the data store, that's not really good for retailers. Because what they can do is they can artificially monetize access to the site and levy whatever price they want. And that is usually only, it's particularly, I should say, detrimental to small nascent brands that can't afford. So you're still going to see Procter & Gamble, and you're still going to see Unilever. But a lot of these small brands that are emerging, they just can't pay those access fees. And so if one of those players in the space starts to do that, and they have code on the retailer site, I know how retailers work. They have very limited IT resources, and to execute a complete switch out without either justifiable revenue increase or cost savings is probably not going to make the top of the list for the IT. So a lot of these retailers now are moving towards having their own display code, their own displays, their own data store, And then they work with us and they work with our competitors to ingest the content through APIs. They set the requirements on the authenticity and the quality of the data. So I talked about moderation earlier, how we moderate content.
Sure.
And we adjust ourselves and comply with that, and we share the content and other people. And that also gives brands choices because it drives cost efficiency and it doesn't allow excessive monopolistic costs from going in. So I see a lot of retailers moving in that direction, particularly in the last year. And from the ones I'm talking to, they will move dramatically that way in the next year or two.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and actually that leads me, you've in part answered it to my next question, which is kind of where is this all going? So it sounds like that's one of the things that's happening is this trend will continue to sort of owning the reviews from the retailer standpoint.
Yeah, I think they want to own every aspect of the customer experience. They're trying to differentiate. There's a big, the retailer that has probably garnered the most attention other than Amazon during this pandemic, or I wouldn't call them a retailer, call them a platform, it's Instacart, right? So Instacart is, I've seen numbers that say that they control maybe 60% of all grocery e-commerce during the pandemic.
Yep.
That's a huge number. The question is, are they the friend or the enemy of the retailers that are in their network, right? Because they're trying to create a homogeneous shopping experience for their consumers that allows them, they understand how it's all laid out. All they have to do is just switch the retailer, and the only thing that changes is the item assortment and the prices. Otherwise, it pretty much looks the same. Well, that was really great for a lot of grocery retailers when they were trying to figure out how to compete with Amazon and Walmart, and had absolutely, like most grocery retailers, little to no capital resources to invest against it. Along comes Instacart and they say, hey, you give me your store level inventory and I'll build you an e-commerce platform. And they were all fat and happy for a while. And then Amazon bought Whole Foods and decided to pull out of Instacart. And what happened? Instacart started marketing to all those former all those former Whole Foods shoppers by knowing what they bought and being able to market to them on where they could find that content elsewhere. So interesting times we live in. But Instacart's another one where they don't have ratings and reviews. And we know from our research how important ratings and reviews are, that even a single review can drive as much as 65% lift of conversion. So what we see increasingly are brands not waiting for retailers to get around to implementing ratings and reviews. So let's say that there are those that allow sharing. Then there are those that either don't allow sharing, only allow native content, or they don't have it at all. So what do? Well, they repurpose the content they're collecting into new and meaningful ways. I mentioned to you that the single most important part of the product page from our research, well, the research that we saw the Baymart Institute do, they're probably the gold standard in product page analysis, but they said that the image carousel is at the top. So if you go to Amazon right now and you look up Cliff Bar, you're going to see in the rotation of the images available, you're going to see some verbatims from consumers, 5-star verbatims that they're putting into their image carousels as a method of instilling trust and authenticity. Well, it's not a far leap to take that and say, well, why don't I just do summary statistics from all the content I'm collecting on my brand page, saying my average rating is 4.6. I see displays in store. I saw a display by NYX Cosmetics in a Target store over Christmas that said NYX 4.5 out of 5-star rating at Target.com. So they went the extra mile and not just use all of their data. They use specifically the content that displays on Target. So using something like the image carousel to convey on many, many retail sites that either have a closed system or don't even collect it is a way for brands to start sharing that authenticity with consumers to help them make better business or purchasing decisions.
Interesting. So basically you see kind of brands taking more of the kind of proactive approach versus waiting around for the retailers to sort of develop this and have, reviews come in organically. That makes a lot of sense. we talked a little bit before we hit record here. One of the specific products you offer, which I think is really interesting, related to Amazon, where it's not syndication, but it's a way to kind of, I guess you can explain it better than me, but make it easier for customers to write genuine reviews on Amazon, or to repurpose them to Amazon. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure, John. We have a feature in our platform called Share to Amazon. And what it allows is, as someone is writing a review on a brand site, either they went there organically, or maybe they were sent a post-purchase email for those that have direct-to-consumer e-commerce and the verified purchase, and they're directed to write a review on the brand site. At the end of the process, they are presented with the opportunity to then share the review they just wrote with Amazon. And if they choose to, they click a button. What it does is it then takes them immediately to the corresponding write a review page for that exact product that's carried on Amazon. It takes the star rating that they gave on the brand site, pre-populates it into the star rating on the write a review Amazon page. And this is all done through connectivity and understanding of the ASIN number of the product. And then it copies the actual text of the review, so that all they have to do is paste it into the comment section and click submit. And that's 3 clicks. And that, from our perspective, is the lowest friction way of sharing content over. Just to give you an idea, for food and beverage, we're seeing click-through rate of about 30 to 35%. And then we can also use our spiders to go back and actually look at the reviews that were written and match them up to the brand site, and report back to the retailer not only what was the click-through rate, but what was the completion rate. And that's important because they want to understand, are people actually writing reviews? Now, I will preface all of this by saying that this process is completely compliant with all of the authenticity requirements that Amazon states. So for instance, if we have a large sampling community that our brands use, we send out samples, and in exchange, they write reviews. Any review that's generated from a sampling or a sweepstakes or anything else like that, that doesn't qualify. So we will not forward over anyone writing a review to Amazon, because they have their own proprietary sampling community line. And they do that. So we comply completely with Amazon, and we make sure that the content, but this is a great way for brands that are either selling D2C on their own site, or maybe they send out an email. I have a great client we just onboarded. The very first week we brought them on board, they sent an email blast out to their CRM database saying, would you like to write a review? They collected 1,000 reviews in 2 days.
Yeah.
And that, since they didn't incentivize that, that was all entirely compliant. And we could then present the share to Amazon functionality on that particular outreach as well.
Yeah. That's super interesting. It's a really unique approach. There's obviously so much, gray market, black market activity going on when it comes to Amazon reviews. The legitimate solutions are few and far between to generating more reviews. But I think that's a really interesting one where, ultimately it's still the customer. They're still writing a review in an unbiased kind of organic way. You're just essentially making it easier for them to get that onto Amazon.
Yeah, it's interesting. 2 of the most effective ways of collecting content now are actually what you and I would probably consider retro technologies. The one format that works even better than email is actually SMS. We get about a 6x click-through rate, because people can ignore emails, but they really hate ignoring messages that show up on their phone. The other one is actually QR codes. They were invented in the 90s for the Japanese automobile industry. They came back to life when the smartphone was introduced, but you needed to download a separate app to read them, and they never ran anywhere. But in the last couple of years, both Apple and Google have built QR code readers into their camera apps. So all you have to do is just hover over the QR code, and it takes you right to the site. We have clients that are putting QR codes on their products and asking for reviews. I see that a lot actually with Amazon too.
And that actually works, huh? Because I'm one of those people that was heard the QR code pitch, 10 years ago, saw it kind of live its first life cycle of disappointment. And I mean, just personally haven't really, looked into it since, but
Yeah, the other way they do it is I've got an example of a client that has a distillery on the Bourbon Trail, and they at the end of the tour they sample the bourbon, and once they're done sampling the bourbon, they hand them a little business card that's printed and it has a QR code, and if you hover over and they show them how to do it, it takes them right to the writer review page. They generate an enormous amount of organic regular content because sometimes it's not just about the volume and the star rating. There are a lot of different factors that go into how different demographic groups, particularly age groups, consider content. In iGen and millennials, they typically discount reviews that are older than 30 days. So having a steady stream, not just running one big campaign to get 600 reviews.
Yeah.
Having a steady organic stream. And that's why putting a QR code on, am I telling a little nutrition bar that they should put that code on their individual package that's very strained for space? No, but they can put it on their multi-pack. They've got a lot of empty real estate there. Next time you do your design change, it doesn't cost you anything to get a QR code. It just takes you to the website, and you can generate not as much content as you might from a big paid sampling campaign, but you can generate 5, 10, 15 reviews every month for your product, and you solved your problem because it's just organic. It keeps coming in.
Yeah, that's interesting. It also, I mean, they're both legitimate, but that appears to be more legitimate. I think there's been this really interesting, I've seen this in some of the data, there's been an interesting kind of backlash to reviews in some ways, where now customers are, still very much interested in reviews, but trying to use their own sort of methodology to determine what is and isn't legitimate now. Because I think for a lot of consumers, there's this sort of, nagging question, where 5 years ago it was just, sure, all reviews are legitimate, no one questioned it. But I've seen, I saw a study, maybe it was 6 months ago, that said that actually if you have only 5-star reviews, like at scale, you've hundreds or thousands of them, you will actually convert at a lower rate than if you have like a 4.7 average, because there's some customers that just assume, oh well, that can't be real. So that's
spot on, John. We've done an enormous amount of research with Northwestern University that tells us that the actual sweet spot for review range is somewhere between 4.2 and 4.7. To your message, nobody believes that. I can't tell you how many times I go to brand sites and all I see are 5-star reviews, or 4 and 5. There are competitors of ours that allow, with a click of a button, the suppression of any low-rated reviews. That in our estimate, we tell all of our clients, you should not be doing that. It will hurt your authenticity, and it will not get you the desired effect. If you see when our recommendation to brands are really, you need to answer, ideally at a minimum, every low rated review. So if you get a 1 or a 2-star review, you should be responding to that review as quickly as possible. You need to build the infrastructure within your organization. This is where we talked a little bit earlier about who are the people that run e-commerce at brands and what have you. And sometimes there's a disconnect between that and customer service, or the actual brand managers. Y'all need to get together and figure out how you're going to respond to questions and low-rated reviews, and do so in a very timely basis. And speak with one voice. Make sure that it comports to whatever the tone that the brand is trying to establish. Like an OTC health medication tone is very different than BuzzBall's a pre-mixed cocktail drink, right? So you need to make sure that everybody speaks with one voice, but you do so in a very timely manner. I would also recommend you respond to, if you can, all the positive reviews, because consumers that see that you are responsive and engaged, they become brand ambassadors for you. So it's very important that you pay attention to what people are saying, to maintain your reputation and to make sure that people are excited and they want to buy your brand.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I would say, on the at least on Amazon, obviously my expertise, the 1 and 2-star reviews, even 3-star reviews, I mean, that should just be like a no-brainer to respond to every single one of those.
Yep.
And I would even argue that, if you really do it the right way, you can actually end up further ahead than if there was no negative review at all. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing to see generally positive reviews. It's another to see, especially on a higher price point product, something went sideways and then the customer had an immediate, really good interaction with customer service.
Mm-hmm.
That can actually even do more, benefit than harm ultimately. If the customer can basically read through that kind of conversation and see that, oh, well, if I have a problem now, I know it's going to get dealt with promptly, and
Yeah,
I have faith in the brand.
I always click on the 1-star reviews because I want to see how bad it could possibly be. But
Yep.
what brands also need to start worrying about is making sure that they're not just focused on the star rating and the actual free form review. They have an opportunity to ask some additional questions within reason that they can provide back to people who are reading the reviews to filter that. So asking for an alcohol brand, whether you're you're new to this, you're a cocktail connoisseur, those all become filterable ways that consumers reading reviews can find people who are like them, or at least in their own perception. And it makes the content much more navigable, especially when there are 2,000 or 3,000 reviews for a jar of peanut butter. So being able to ask things that are relevant. One of the biggest things that we do for our clients is in the apparel space. The largest issue that apparel manufacturers deal with are returns.
Sure.
Asking a question as simple as, does this fit true to size? Does it fit a little small or a little big? Will help a consumer who's reading that do a better job of effectively choosing the right size from the get-go. And we've seen market improvements in reduction for return rates by just doing something as simple as that.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Peter, anything else that you think our audience would benefit from knowing?
Yeah, one thing I will talk about is when I talk to brands in particular, and they think about the content that's being generated, they tend to think in terms of Amazon and rest of the world. And the ability to try and bring harmony to that has been very difficult for them, which is why we released a new solution late last year called Amazon Benchmark Reports. Essentially what we're doing is we're scraping all the freely available content that's being generated on Amazon at a category level and mixing it along with the content that a brand is generating on its own. We can do the same for other retailers as well. But what we're able to do is make objective and meaningful analysis of categories. I was talking with a friend of mine who was running the e-commerce group of a big cosmetics company in New York City. And I asked him, how do you make sense of all this content? He said, oh, I wait till the summer. I hire 4 interns. I put them in a conference room with a couple of computers and I give them a summer project. And I said, is that objective? He said, no. I said, is it even scalable? No, not in the least. He said, so if you can come up with something that's a little bit better, I'm all ears. Well, we did that. So what we did is we built a solution that scrapes it, provides back to them organized at the category level, and presents them with brand health scores. And the brand health scores are based on the average star rating, the number of reviews per product, the recency of that content, the overall sentiment. There are a number of different attributes. And then it allows you to match yourself up against other brands in your category so that you can see how you're doing, and then also compare it against your own natively collected content. What does that mean? It means now brand managers can readily identify what people are saying, and they can identify key themes or topics that are being discussed. So I want to understand whether a topic, and then assign whether that topic is associated with a positive or negative customer sentiment. That is groundbreaking. I saw a study done by 2 professors, one at MIT, one at Northwestern. And what they did is they actually thought that, you know what, I bet your ratings and reviews give me just about as much information as a traditional focus group. So they looked at a number of categories, and what they came back with was, on average, 96% of what was discovered in a focus group, they could have got by just analyzing the ratings and reviews on Amazon.com.
Yeah.
If I can start doing that and scaling it, and brands can find that. So we make that as a solution that's available. I'll tell you, it's probably the hottest selling thing that I've got going right now. Brands big and small are hungry to be able to make sense of all the content they have.
Yeah. That's really cool. That's really interesting. Peter, how do people find out more about that product, more about Power Reviews, connect with you?
So a couple things. Power Reviews, powerreviews.com is the easiest way to find us. For me personally, all of my social media ends in PVS Bond, B-O-N-D. So Twitter, Instagram, but if you see Instagram, you get a lot of pictures of my daughter. Twitter, what have you. And then I also, like you, John, I have a weekly video podcast that I run with my good friend, Sri Rajgopalan. If anyone's interested in seeing that, it's called Consumer Engagement in an Omnichannel World.
Awesome.
It can be found on YouTube and LinkedIn by just looking for the hashtag Sri, S-R-I-A-N-D, PVSB, Sri and PVSB. That's the best way to find us.
Hey, very good. We'll put all that in the show notes as well. Peter, really appreciate you being on.
John, my pleasure. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks again for listening to another episode of E-Commerce Deep Dive. Be sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. And if you get a chance, go in and leave us a rating. It would help a lot. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.